This is the Financial Beat, helping you hit all the right notes in your financial plan. So sit back as we strike up the band. The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler starts now.
We're back with another exciting edition of the Financial Beat today. Logan Sadler, of course, is here. I'm Ron Stutz, and we're going to talk about a lot of things that should be important to you as you think about getting to and through retirement. Logan Sadler, of course, the Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at Regary Financial, serving you in Southern California. Logan, it's been a week since we talked. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ron. Looking forward, as always, to a good show and ready to get to it.
You know, one thing we're going to talk about here is the red zone today, and we got football season coming up, and I know a lot of people are getting excited about that, but we'll relate some things that are important in football to your financial life as well. But first, Let me tell everybody how they can get in touch with you. 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-7526. Easy way. 888-823-PLAN. So important to incorporate the word plan there. Logan Sadler, of course, works with 3 different generations of client families, and all of those folks have different plans. It's all based on an individual situation. Your situation is different from mine. And, people listening to this show, their situation is different. Many of the clients have been with the firm for more than 25 years. So, hey, let's kick off the show today. See what I did there? Kick off. Talk about the red zone. In football, it's, when you get within the last 20 yards of the end zone and you're getting close to scoring on your opponent and you get within the 20-yard line, and you talk about that being the red zone. And you're kind of, there are certain strategies that need to be employed, when you get that close. Let's talk about the financial red zone, which works kind of the same way.
Yeah.
What is the financial red zone, and why do people need to be aware of it?
Yeah, we could categorize that a few different ways, but essentially let's just say for this argument here, right? Let's just say it's 10 years before retirement and 10 years after, right? That is a pretty critical time for most people because we see a lot of different mistakes that potentially could happen throughout that time frame, right? So let's talk about the 10 years before, right? So we see where a lot of clients, if they're retiring in the next 5 or 10 years, a lot of the times that's a time where you really want to kind of be gearing up on what types of income do you need in retirement, what your typical expenses look like, all of those types of considerations. But unfortunately, a lot of people are still in that what we'd call accumulation phase, right? They're still worried about putting money away and watching their accounts grow. And sometimes you see people get a little bit too aggressive and things like that, right? So you just see a lot of times things tend to take a back seat still. And I don't typically see clients get a lot more geared up, I would say, till that 1 to 3 years to retirement. Now, I would say for a lot of you out there, that financial red zone is just a very crucial point where you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to get things geared up for retirement, as well as once you start retirement, making sure that you're able to stick to that plan.
Okay. Would you consider... Tell us the common mistakes that people make. I'm getting ahead of myself. I had another question written down here. What are the most common mistakes that people make in the financial red zone?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the times, let's name a few of them. I think being too aggressive at the wrong time, right? Sometimes people are not sure of what their plan looks like, and they haven't done a lot of that comprehensive planning, so they don't understand what a 20 or 30% decline in their accounts might actually mean to their retirement in 3 to 5 years, right? As well as I would say not having a plan would be number 2, where they're just not aware of what their situation is going to look like in the next few years. As well, I would say the other third thing is not understanding what retirement is going to be like, right? And I think a lot of us, that might sound cheesy because they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm going to wake up, go golf every day, hang out with my spouse, see the grandkids, all that fun stuff, right? And it is a lot of fun, but unfortunately, a lot of times not understanding how you envision retirement from a financial standpoint, also from an emotional standpoint, right? And a day-to-day standpoint. So I think those are probably the 3 things that I see a lot of people tend to not really get straight or not start really working on while they're in that red zone.
Okay, now the question that I was going to ask you a moment ago, and I got ahead of myself. Would you consider somebody in the red zone to be your ideal client?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So most of our clients, I would say, majority of them are in the financial red zone, right? So we typically work with clients that are about 50, 55 years or older. Again, I do have some younger clients, just depending on what their goals are and things like that. But majority of our clients, the answer would be yes. So most of our ideal clients that we work with are in that retirement planning phase, because that is our specialty, and that's where a lot of our tools and our solutions and planning techniques that we use tend to line up very, very well with that age demographic. Now, one thing I think that's very important is how important that question is you just asked, right, Ron? I say that we've talked about this a lot on the show, where it's important to understand the type of advisor that you might be working with, because they might have a different specialty. They might specialize in younger clients, or they might specialize in growing assets, or they might specialize in college planning. Now, it's important to find an advisor. If you're getting ready to retire and you're gearing up for retirement planning, you want to understand that you have an advisor that can really dive deep into your situation and has the right tools, solutions, as well as experience in that type of phase. So yeah, the type of fit of that client is very important to us. That's why we don't just take on every single client out there. It's very important that they're a right fit and that we feel we could provide the most value to them in that situation.
You mentioned diving deep just a moment ago, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about how you can take a deep dive into folks' financial scenario, figure out what their situation is, and it's so important to incorporate, considerations of lifestyle, hopes and dreams in retirement. And I know you work with folks who have certain things they want to do in retirement, and others, it may be totally different. So you get to know folks and help them achieve their goals in their own specific way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, I think one of the biggest things in the financial red zone that a lot of people, when they come in to meet with us at our first visit, let's say, right, Ron, I think one of the biggest things that we tend to define ourselves and help kind of differentiate ourselves is that we look at things very broad scope as far as planning. When people come in, I don't go, hey, do you like stocks, or do you like annuities, or do you like bonds? That's very little of the question. A lot of the times it's really more of, what type of income are you used to living off of, right? Oh, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I make, $100,000 a year. Awesome. How much money do you think you save per month, right? What type of tax rate are you typically used to, right? What type of tax rate would you like to be in retirement? Is there any strategies or solutions we could do now or maybe later on to help make an impact tax-wise? Investment-wise, or would you say you like, up and downs of investments, or you like more conservative investments, right? But looking at income, what type of income are you used to living off of to this point, but what type of income are we going to need into our retirement, right? Have we got our estate planning set up? Have we looked at our tax situation, right? All those types of things that are as important, if not more important, than a lot of the other little stuff that a lot of people tend to talk about. We typically spend a lot more time on our visits, especially with clients when they're looking for comprehensive planning. They want to know that their plan is built to last, right? They want to see, well, what happens if the market went down, or what happens if inflation went up? Those types of things. How would we bear not just the next year or two, but the next 5, 10, or 15 years of our retirement plan? And that's really where our firm really tends to separate ourselves from a lot of the other competition out there, by looking at things a lot more broad scoped and understanding that we're able to put the client first and put a plan in place that fits the client, as well as being able to articulate what the planning strategies are, being able to go through the investments with them and the overall plan, and making sure that they understand it and that they're confident in it to get them to and through retirement.
If you just joined us today, that is the voice of Logan Sadler, Vice President and Chief Investment Officer at Regary Financial in Hemet and also Redlands, and you're listening to the Financial Beat. We're talking about the financial red zone. And Logan, I want to ask, what are some of the main points that you normally end up discussing with someone who's in the financial red zone who does not have a well-defined plan in place when they visit you for the very first time?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the times, Ron, it's typically, like I was talking about earlier, I think it's really more centered around the financial plan, right? I think so many people, if they've met with an advisor in the past, they probably have met with, and again, and I always tell people, I'm not the best advisor in the world. I'm not the only advisor in the world. There's a lot of really, really great advisors out there. But unfortunately, a lot of the people that come into our office have typically had an advisor where they just haven't got either everything they thought they should be getting out of them as far as the planning. Maybe they just talk about investments, whether it's insurance or whether it's brokerage or whatever it is. And that's typically where when clients come into our office, they're kind of typically pleased to hear that obviously we offer investments, right? We are eligible. We have those tools in our arsenal, I'll say, to where we could use insurance products, we could use brokerage products, we could use all of that. And again, some of those could be really great for certain plans, but really looking at what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What type of plan do we need to put together to help make this, this overall plan be successful? What type of changes can we make now to our financial situation to help better us next year, the following year, and then 5 or 10 or 20 years from now throughout our retirement plan? And I think that's where we really tend to separate ourselves and really change the conversation more into what can we be doing now from a comprehensive standpoint to help better your family situation throughout retirement by helping achieve your goals and also addressing the concerns that you might have with the upcoming retirement phase.
If you're in the financial red zone, that's when you need to get really serious about your retirement planning if you're not already. And you need to have a conversation with a good advisor, someone who is taking everything into account, a holistic approach. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call to get in touch with Rigari Financial, serving you in Southern California. 888-823-PLAN. That's the number for Logan Sadler. And Logan will be glad to sit down and talk with you in one of the convenient offices, Hemet or Redlands, or maybe even on Zoom if you want to do it that way. Use that technology. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call. He'll talk with you for a little while to kind of get acquainted, to find out what your major concerns are, and then you can decide if you'd like to work together from there. There's no cost for this at all. It's something that Logan Sadler offers to all the listeners of this show. And there's no obligation, no strings attached. Have that conversation. You can move on from there if you like. And if not, hey, that's cool too. 888-823-PLAN, your number to call. I'm Ron Stutz. He's Logan Sadler, and we'll have more coming up in just a moment.
Do you ever find yourself skipping through countless songs trying to find the perfect one? Yeah, we've been there too, and know it can be frustrating. Much like skipping through the countless advertisements from other financial advisors, it can seem like there's so much misinformation. But here on the Financial Beat, you can rest assured we're providing you with the best information possible. So don't push skip on this show, because we have some important information coming up.
Welcome back to more of the Financial Beat. The beat goes on, as they say. Logan Sadler, I'm Ron Stutz. We are here to talk about getting you to and through retirement. And Logan, before I give out the phone number for folks to get in touch, but let's remind folks of your podcasts and also your YouTube channel that is available for anyone to peruse. How do they get to all that good information?
Yeah, you can head over to podcast and type in the Financial Beat. And again, that might be on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever it is you look at podcast or watch podcast. You could type in the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, and there is tons and tons of episodes up there for you to check out. Each episode's about an hour, so each of them give you some pretty good insight to what our show is about, and also to keep you guys as informed as we can. And then you can also head over to the YouTube channel, and that might, you're going to type in the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, and that might just give you just about everything you might need to know, right? We're doing videos each week. They're between 3 to 5 minutes long, some of them a little bit longer, and they're going over different retirement planning topics and questions that a lot of you guys out there right now listening to the show might have. So go check those out and see if there's some strategies or some tips or some solutions on there that might give you some value into your retirement.
You do such a good job of getting that information out there in a variety of ways, and hope everybody will take advantage of those ways. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call if you'd like to give a ring to the office and set up a time to have a discovery meeting with Logan Sadler. 888-823-PLAN. That is 888-823-7526. But we always use the word plan. Makes it easy to remember. 888-823-PLAN. Hey, Logan, one of the topics that we don't talk about a whole lot on this show, but certainly it is on a lot of folks' minds. Let's talk about bonds for a moment here. One of the main things that people need to understand about bonds before investing in them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I would say, traditionally bonds, most of the time what they're there for in a portfolio is going to be for either safety or lower risk or income, right? And again, depending on the bonds and things like that, that could all be a variant there. But essentially what people need to understand about bonds, there's a few different ways to invest in bonds, right? You have directly investing in bonds, and then you have things like bond funds and stuff like that, that maybe you're a basket of or selection of bonds. So there's a few different ways that people could be in bonds, just like when people say, oh, I'm in stocks, right? Well, perfect. What type of stocks are you in, right? That's one thing I think is funny, where sometimes people will say, oh, well, I have stocks and bonds. You think I should do something different? And it's like, well, what stocks do you have and what bonds do you have, right? Things can be very, very different on that front.
Okay. More questions about bonds here that may be on people's minds. Many folks view bonds as a safe alternative to the stock market. You always hear about stocks and bonds, bonds. What's your take on that? Is it an alternative, and how does that common knowledge that people think they have, how does that fit into today's world?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally speaking, that would be pretty right on, right? I mean, so traditionally speaking, people buy bonds or have bonds in their portfolio as an alternative to the stock market. So hoping, what most alternatives are really there for is they're not meant to outperform each other. They're meant to typically perform, where they're not correlated, hopefully, right? So sometimes if stocks are up, maybe your bonds are up a little bit, but they're not down, right? But if stocks are down, maybe your bonds are still even or up, right? It's kind of the goal of how those are kind of supposed to work in tandem there and not do things correlated. Now, with that said, traditionally stocks and bonds have been a pretty good match. Now, during 2022, we did have a weird year where, bond funds and things like that have had, really about a 5-year struggle on most bond funds. And then in 2022, with the rapid rise of interest rates, it did have some effects on stocks as well as bonds, right? So it was not very many times in history you could look back and say that both of those didn't perform well, right? Or maybe even in some cases had double-digit losses, right? That's very, very rare where you could look back and see that. So what many people need to understand is that bonds are an alternative to the market, but we do think most people nowadays, with the rate sensitivity that we're in, as well as the lack of yield in some bonds, I do think there is some need for some other alternative investments to complement your bonds and stocks.
What are the pros and cons of these bond mutual funds that it seems a very high percentage of folks are invested in these days?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is, right, is just like any type of stock mutual fund or stock ETFs, there's pros and cons to both of these, right? So basically, if you buy an individual, bond, right? Let's say you buy a Bank of America bond or XYZ bond or whatever bond you buy, right? You could buy an individual bond and they'll pay you basically a yield or a coupon, and if you hold that till maturity, you can get that yield off it, or that income, so to speak, right? So this could be great as far as receiving income. The problem is that they do carry a little bit more risk due to, default risk. So if something were to happen to XYZ bond, then that means that your principal could be affected, right? So a lot of people use bond funds because you can grab a bunch of different bonds inside one fund and not have to worry as much about whether that company's credit rating is as strong or things like that, right? So it helps diversify things. The problem is, in some cases, you don't get the consistent yields you might need or you might have been able to get from a traditional bond or an individual bond. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. I think both of them can be used and both of them can be effective for what they're used for, but you got to understand the goal of that bond or bond fund.
You're listening to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. Once again, Logan's number, 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN. I'll give you that number again coming up in just a few minutes. We'll talk more about why it's so important to get in touch with Logan right now. More on bonds now. If somebody came into your office, Logan, next week with a significant portion of their portfolio invested in bonds and bond funds, what would be your advice to them?
It really would just depend on the client, Ron. And as we always say, every client is a little bit different when they walk in our door. They all have different goals and things like that. But I could tell you a quick story where I did have a client last year who walked in and he said, Logan, I'm 62 years old. Him and his wife were married, and he had a large amount of money. He had around, almost $2 million that he had saved up for retirement. And he had said, I wasn't going to use a financial advisor. I was going to do it myself, right? And I got in this situation where the markets were extremely volatile in 2022, and he was really, really close to retirement, right? About a year away. And he was shifting more and more money into bond funds last year. and he couldn't figure out why his account value just continued to drop, right? He was in basically high yield bonds, which are junk bonds, and then a stable value bond fund by one of the large companies out there. Unfortunately, both those, his stocks that he had were down, on average around 15%, and his bonds were down around 10%, right? So he kept saying, well, what is going on here? Why am I continuously losing money on both of the investments that I thought would be diversified, right? So that's why he ended up calling us, and we were able to throw in many different strategies to help maybe diversify some of his risk away from just stocks and bonds, and in that case, reduce some of his overall risk in the bonds because they weren't doing what he needed them to do as far as having that safety and that stability that he wanted out of that in his portfolio. So it really depends on the client, Ron, on what their overall goals are. But I typically tell clients by utilizing bonds, stocks, we also look at annuities as an alternative. We also look at treasuries as well as real estate investments, structured notes, many different other types of alternatives rather than just having stocks and bonds, because although those have been great, in many cases, some clients need more out of the portfolio and more diversification to help provide that safety, growth, income, and maybe even tax efficiency. So if you're one of those people out there and maybe you have some bonds in your portfolio and you're wondering what should you be doing differently as you're gearing up for retirement planning, definitely think it's time you can reach out to us, give us a call. I'd love to spend an hour with you and tell you a little bit more about our firm and our process and our history here, as well as learn a whole lot more about you and seeing how if we might be a good fit to be the firm to help get you to and through retirement and be your financial planner.
At Regary Financial, they take a comprehensive approach to planning. And if you'd like to have a conversation with Logan Sadler, here's a very important number, 888-823-PLAN. 888-823-PLAN. That'll get you a conversation with Logan Sadler in one of the convenient Regary offices, Hemet or Redlands, or you might want to do it via Zoom. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call to set it up. There's no charge for this and no obligation at all. 888-823-PLAN, your number to call to make it happen. A lot of people have been listening to this show for a long time and just haven't gotten around to making that phone call. Why not make today the day that you do it? 888-823-PLAN. You're listening to The Financial Beat. Ron Stutz here along with Logan Sadler, and there's more coming up right after this.
Did you know music is good for the heart? A study at a university in Italy showed that music helps promote a better cardiovascular system. But we also know that a sound financial plan is good for peace of mind. Keep listening to The Financial Beat so we can help you find a plan that both your head and your heart can agree on.
We're back now with more of The Financial Beat with the one and only, often imitated but never duplicated, Logan Sadler. Hey, let's talk about some situations that are really awkward moments. And I know you go through a lot of these when you meet with folks because different people have different issues. Yep. Part of being a good financial advisor is helping people navigate awkward and uncomfortable situations related to their money. And we've often talked about how you have to put on different hats when you deal with folks. Sometimes you feel like a marriage counselor or a psychiatrist or whatever the case
absolutely.
may be. But let me name a few situations here, and you tell me how you guide clients who find themselves in these awkward scenarios. Okay. And I'm assuming that there's a really high probability you've encountered most of these in real life at some point.
That'd be awesome. I'm excited.
Let's say that a client wants to remove one of their children as beneficiary on their accounts. Have you had this happen?
I always tell people in this situation, it's not awkward for me because I always tell them it's never one of those situations where it's not my money. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to make any type of guesses or make things uncomfortable. My job simply is just to put all the information that you're giving me and put it all into the most accurate plan we can that's going to help facilitate what it is you're trying to accomplish with your plan, right?
Sure.
And so I'm just here to give you some advice. I always tell people, whether it's taking more risk, less risk, taking income, beneficiaries, whatever it is, I mean, it's your money and we could do whatever you want to do with it. My job is just to help give you the best advice to get you wherever we're trying to go. And so that's why I always tell people you don't ever have to be shy about things. The whole point of our relationship is it should be very open and we should be able to talk about things.
Let's say that someone knows they need to make a change from their current financial advisor. In their heart, they know it. but they've been working with this person for a very long time. Maybe they're a friend of the family or whatever, and they just don't know how to tell that advisor that they want to move on and move their money someplace else. How do you advise them?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, right? I mean, I'll give you a quick little story here. I had a person who just came on board with us about a year ago from the radio, actually, called in, and him and his wife, and they had been with their advisor for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, something like that. And he did a great job. I mean, the accounts grew well. He was there to advise them through some tricky situations and did a really, really good job. But when it came time to the retirement planning phase, it came to a point where they weren't able to get everything they needed out of that advisor at this point. Not that he had did anything wrong, their relationship was great, everything was good, but it just came to a point where they were looking for someone to provide more value and someone that specialized in a situation of life that they were transitioning to, right? So I think it's super important to understand what type of an advisor you have. I mean, what do they specialize in? What type of tools and services do they have to help get you in that phase? Again, if you're younger, it's always good to having an advisor that maybe specializes in that growth phase and helping clients that are younger. If you're, 55 years old, 60 years old, and you're transitioning to retirement, it's very important to help make sure you have an advisor that is there to help guide you throughout this transition you're going to, because there's a lot of upcoming decisions you're going to have to make, and making sure you have the right advisor there to help guide you through that is extremely important. And one thing I always say for a lot of you out there listening to the show, if you have an advisor and maybe you've been happy with him or her, or maybe you haven't been happy with him or her, and you maybe have $200,000, or you might have $5 million, and you're looking for someone to maybe give you a second opinion and help walk you through your situation and maybe see if you can't find a better fit, or someone that might just be able to provide a little more value in your situation, that's what that discovery meeting's for. It's really a good chance for us just to get to know each other. I could explain a little bit more about our firm and our services and our value we bring to your retirement, and also gives me a chance to get to know you a little bit better and just see if we're a good fit to be the ones to help guide and transition you to and through retirement, because again, that is our specialty. Many of our clients that have been with our firm for 5 years, 10 years, maybe even over 20 years, we help transition them successfully to and through retirement.
Here's how you can get one of those discovery meetings that we talk about so often. It's simply a conversation with Logan Sadler about your financial situation. 888-823-PLAN. 888-823-PLAN. Call that number now. Leave a message with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back from the good folks at Regari, first opportunity, and then you can arrange a time to have your conversation with Logan. It's not going to cost you anything, not going to carry with it any kind of obligation at all. 888-823-PLAN. That is the number to call to make it happen. One more time, 888-823-PLAN. Remember also that at Regari, they have great partnerships with local CPAs, attorneys, real estate agents, mortgage lenders, Medicare specialists, everybody who really has anything to do with your financial life. Logan Sadler can help you with all that by offering you well-rounded guidance, taking in all the aspects of your financial life, offering you good guidance in all the things financial for their clients. That's what he's all about. Logan Sadler, 888-823-PLAN. You're listening to the Financial Beat. Ron Stutz here, along with Logan Sadler. There's more on the other side of this timeout.
Financial stability, relaxing retirement, tax reductions. Do those things sound like music to your ears? Then you've tuned to the right show, because here on the Financial Beat, we want to give you the tools to build your financial plan. So don't change that dial, because Logan Sadler has some information that will leave you singing the tune of a better retirement.
Welcome back to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler, VP, Chief Investment Officer at Regari Financial. Offices in Hemet and Redlands, and wherever you are in Southern California, or anywhere, really, if you're listening to this conversation, you can call 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN, and get a conversation going with Logan Sadler. He's not going to put you off on anybody else. He would love to have an opportunity to get to know you. You can get to know him. You can decide if you'd like to move on from there. Remember also that at Regari Financial, they have great partnerships with local CPAs, attorneys, real estate agents, Medicare specialists, mortgage lenders, everybody involved in your financial life, and can give you good advice. It is, as I mentioned earlier in the show today, a very comprehensive approach. 888-823-PLAN. That's your number to call to get a discovery meeting. That is a getting to know you session with Logan. You can either do it via Zoom or in one of the convenient offices. Again, 888-823-PLAN. There are certain questions you need to ask yourself before retiring. And Logan, I'm going to give you the question. You expound on these with details about why it's important to have the answers for these before you leave the workplace.
Okay.
So, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I guess one question you need to ask yourself is, do I have enough cash? What about that one?
Yeah, that's typically a pretty important one, right? Because I always tell clients it's nice to have some savings and some cash built up to where if something goes on, because most people have a 401k or an IRA when they're retiring, and then maybe even not a whole lot of cash outside of that, right? I've seen clients where they have, $3 million in their IRA and they might have $20,000 in the bank account, right? And I've seen that many different times. And I've seen some clients where they have $100,000 in their IRA and they might have $200,000 in their bank account, right? It just depends on each client. But I think having enough cash is super important. And the main reason why is if something does come up, it's nice to have some places to pull money from that might not be any type of tax implication, and it's readily accessible for any type of emergency.
Okay, next question here. Do I know how much income I need? A lot of people out there don't really know the importance of having those regular income streams set up.
Yeah, it's super important. I remember there was a client who was interviewing our firm and ended up wanting to come on board. So we were going through our process, and let's call them Joe and Sue. Okay, they were both. I want to say she was 63, he was 65, and they're getting ready to retire. And it was funny because they had talked with a financial advisor, and he said, here's what your income's going to be, right? And he had said, your income's going to be $6,000 a month. And they said, okay, but they didn't really get a whole lot more clarification on other topics and things. So long story short, they ended up interviewing our firm, and we started to dive a little deeper in the weeds. And it was funny because he had said, well, I heard I can get around $6,000 a month. And I said, well, that's awesome. What do you need to live off of, though? And he goes, well, I don't know, right? And so he goes, the $6,000 a month sounds great, but I mean, if you don't know, maybe you need $10,000. If that's the case, then $6,000 is not nearly enough, right? You might need to keep working, or you might have to look at some other avenues where maybe we could generate more income. So diving a little bit deeper into the expenses, as well as how much income you need, is probably as crucial to anything in your retirement plan, because we always say the income plan is the foundation of every successful retirement plan, right? So definitely up there on the important scale.
Okay, next question here about questions you need to ask before retiring. Do I know how much I might be liable for in taxes? Some people don't even think about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've had some clients where they are like, well, what tax bracket would I fall into in retirement, right? And a very valid question. And that's one of the things we do spend a lot of time on here, is looking at what type of tax impacts we have, right? What type of income streams do we have? Maybe Social Security, rent, maybe continued wages, maybe IRA distributions, maybe Roth distributions, and maybe brokerage accounts. Those all could be taxed differently. So it's important to understand what type of tax situation you're going to be presented in retirement, and what assets do you have and how they're taxed. Just going over clients with that and educating them further about what assets they have and how each asset might be taxed a little bit differently is as important, because that goes back to that same question as far as income, right, Ron? Where that's great, you need $100,000 a year, but if that's net, that means that after taxes, right, you might only get $75,000 a year, right? So that's not the $100,000 you needed to pay your bills. So it's important to understand what type of tax impact you might have throughout your retirement.
Okay, another question here. Do I have an income plan to pay the bills even if I live to be 100 years old or maybe even older? Do you have anybody who's that old?
You know what's funny, right? When you said that, I was thinking I definitely have many of them in their late 90s. I don't think I have anybody that's 100. I want to say my oldest client I can remember was 98.
Wow.
And I have a bunch of them in their early 90s. Again, our firm's been around for about 25 years, so our founder was around for quite a while. So we have clients. He was actually licensed since the mid 80s. So we've had clients that have been with us for a long time. And
it's only a matter of time before you have somebody hit 100.
It's true, right? It's going to happen. Yeah. And I think one of the big things too, the other thing that came to my head, Ron, when you were saying that was, looking at income plans. I've seen many people that have came in, they're like, Logan, I've done the math. I got $1 million put away for retirement. What I'm going to do is take $100,000 a year out, and that should last me at least 10 years. If I have some interest, maybe 12 or 13 years, right? And I go, okay, but you're 60, so by the mid 70s, you're out of money, right? And so it's not a really great retirement plan, because my question always is, when I look at the research, and I could pull all this up for them on our retirement plans and show them, well, that's great, but you're right. Here's exactly when you're out of money. Even if you average this type of return, maybe 3%, 5%, 8%, whatever they want me to plug in, I could show them when they would run out of money. And I will say most people, maybe it sounds okay, but when you really start to look at it and go, well, what happens if I did live till life expectancy or a little bit past it, right?
Yeah.
I'm out of money at 75 or 80, and I might live till 85 or 90. So it's a very real thing when you're looking at your retirement plan. The income plan is so important, not just how good it is when you start, but also how good is it going to be for how long you can finish. And if you lived longer than that, is there still money left over to continue the income?
A lot of people say, Logan, my dad died when he was 60 and my mother died at 67, and I'm just not going to live that long. But the question is, what if you do? You got to be ready.
Exactly. What if you did, right? It's always a very short answer back, because none of us know when our day is called, right? It could be tomorrow, it could be 100 years from now, and it's one of those things where you really do got to plan for the longevity of it, and making sure that you have that consistent income stream in your retirement that's built to last is, I think, about as important as it can get.
One more question here in regards to questions we all need to ask ourselves before we retire. And these are inflationary times we're living in here. Do you have a hedge against inflation? Very important question to ask. You got to consider inflation and how that's going to affect your portfolio. And again, a lot of people don't even think about that.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, right? I think it's one of the biggest things that we could look at as well during this last 3 years or so that we've been taught, right, is inflation can go rather high. And a lot of us when we look back on charts and things, we forgot how high inflation really could go throughout different periods of time. And if you're one of those people who, let's say you retired in 2015, you've really seen the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years inflation just really ramp up, right? So it's one of those things where you look at, if you retire the last 10 years or so, you have seen your $5,000 a month paychecks in your retirement go to where they're not buying you $5,000 worth of goods today, right? So it's so important. And even when we look at annuities nowadays, right, like there's annuities out there with inflation protection on them, right, where sometimes the income payment you get will even go up, because even the insurance companies realize that that's a big need for a lot of people retiring out there. So when you're looking at your retirement plan, you want to make sure that you have some income built in there with inflation, whether that's via pensions, Social Securities, different market monies and things like that, or even, like I had mentioned, maybe even an annuity or something that has an inflation protection on it, can be so important. And these are that was actually one of my favorite segments we've done in a while there, Ron, because those were all great questions that a lot of you, when you're coming in to get a retirement plan, those are questions that I'm going to be asking you, right, with a little bit of a reverse on it, just making sure that we have all the checklist. You don't fly a plane without going over the checklist, right?
Yeah.
Just like retiring, you want to make sure that you have gone through a checklist and that you have a financial professional that actually specializes in retirement planning that'll be there to help give you the valuable advice you're going to need, not only now, but throughout your retirement.
Yeah, a lot of questions you need to ask yourself before you retire. Come in and have a conversation with Logan Sadler, and he will certainly help you think of things that you may never have even considered. So important. 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-7526. That's your number to call for Gary Financial, 888-823-PLAN. You can call that number right now. Leave a message with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back first part of the week, and then you can have your conversation with Logan Sadler that's not going to cost you anything, and there are no strings attached whatsoever. He's not going to try to sell you anything. No high pressure to put you into any kind of product. No money is going to change hands. It's just a conversation, and you can make it happen by calling 888-823-PLAN. I'm Ron Stutz. He's Logan Sadler, and we'll be right back with more on the Financial Beat.
It's getting to know you time.
You're listening to the Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. And Logan, I got an off-the-wall question here for you. A lot of folks enjoy hearing your answers to these questions that are out of the blue. I got one for you today. Crazy one. What's the ugliest car you've ever seen?
Oh man, I don't want to offend anybody because I know there's a lot of car guys and girls out there that have their opinions. But I'm going to go with the safe bet here. I'm going to say the one I probably dislike the most is the smart car.
Really?
Yeah, it's just so small, right? And not that it's ugly by any means, but it's odd when you see it, right?
Yeah.
There's obviously Teslas and other cars that might look unique or different, but I would say the smart car is one that whenever you see one, you know right away you saw one, right? It's just a little bit smaller than everything else you're seeing out there on the road, so I'd have to go with that one.
I'm going to name one here that a lot of our listeners might remember this. It came out in 1958. And a lot of people say it was ugly. I don't think it was particularly ugly, but it didn't stick around for very long. I think they made it for 1 or 2 years. The Edsel by Ford,
Oh, okay. I'll have to look that one up. I don't remember if I've seen one of those.
Again, I don't think it was really all that ugly, to tell you the truth, but a lot of people thought it was.
Just different looking?
Yeah. It was just a little different for the time. 1958 and 59, I think, is the only years they made it. I could be wrong.
Well, now I'm going to Google the ugliest cars out there in history, and I'll have a different answer on the next show.
Sounds good, man. Just remind me to talk about it, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be back with more in just a moment. You're listening to The Financial Beat.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of a plan that has some serious issues. Much better. That's the sound of a plan that was created by someone listening to The Financial Beat with Logan Sadler. So which sound is your financial plan making?
We're back now with more of The Financial Beat, and the beat goes on, as they say. Logan Sadler is here. He's the Vice President, Chief Investment Officer at Rigeri Financial. Now, Rigeri has been around for a long time, and there are lots of folks who have been with his firm for more than a quarter of a century. Logan Sadler can help you get to and through retirement in the most efficient way possible. And by that, I mean efficient in terms of your income streams, but efficient in terms of the taxes you pay. You don't want to pay more than you absolutely have to. Logan Sadler can help with all of that. Number to call if you'd like to get in touch and have a conversation is 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-7526. But the easy way to remember it is by using the word plan, 888-823-PLAN. As always, we get lots of great questions. We have some that have come in via email this week. And Logan, I know you love doing this segment. I do too, because, I learned some things from some of these situations that folks point out. You do such a great job of coming up with answers for them.
Well, thanks.
First question today is from Paul in Oceanside. And Paul says, Logan, I'm 72 years old and still working, making about $150,000 a year. I have about $1.5 million in my 403B, which I haven't had to start taking distributions from since I'm still working and contributing to it. However, when I retire in a couple of years, I'm thinking that my RMDs are going to be massive. Anything I can do right now to start planning for that?
Yeah, that's a great question there, Paul. So there's actually a few different scenarios where I've actually had this similar situation, pretty much to a T work out, where similar situation. And first off, congratulations, still working, 72, got plenty of money saved, it seems like, and making a good income now, which is all great things, right? But unfortunately, like you had said, unfortunately, the tax bill is coming eventually on the 403B. Now, one thing I typically we could utilize here, there's a few different ways to do it, right? You have charitable distributions, where I have some clients where when it's time to take RMDs, they would rather, instead of paying tax on that money, they'd rather, if they're at a point where they don't need it, they'd rather give some of it or all of it to charity, depending on the amount. So that is one type of deduction we could utilize there to help minimize tax impact. The others are Roth conversions. Now, I've had a lot of clients where, while they're still working, maybe they're $150,000 a year tax rate. I don't think you said if he was married or not, but
No.
There's a couple different tax rates where whether you're single or whether you're married, you might have some room to wiggle around to do Roth conversions, right? So you might have some where we could take some money out of that $1.5 million now and start paying taxes on some of it and converting some of that over to Roth, just depending on your tax bracket. The reason why we might want to do that is it helps get money that's growing taxable over to money that would then start growing tax-free, right? So obviously there's some taxes due in the middle there, but for a lot of people, depending on income, I could plug this in and really kind of show you based off investments and returns and things like that, as well as tax brackets and future tax brackets, what might be the best way to help start really looking at this from a tax perspective and really start looking at how we can make this more efficient for this next few years, but then also, throughout your retirement. So definitely give us a call, Paul. I'd love to sit down and share some more with you about some of those different solutions that I think would definitely be a good fit to start talking about.
Paul, thanks very much for the question. And again, a phone call is in order so you can talk more in detail about all of this. 888-823-PLAN. Roy in Winchester. Roy said, my wife died a month ago, and she was the one who handled most of our financial matters. I'm in the process of organizing things right now. What are the main financial things that I need to be thinking about? She had been retired for a few years, and I just retired last year. How can you help Roy?
Yeah, sorry, Roy. Well, thanks for writing in, but sorry, that's a tough situation to go through, and our condolences are with you. And thanks for writing to the show. So it's hard to give you some direct advice here without knowing a lot of your situation, but there's a few action items I'll give you that would be a great spot to start. And then any further questions, obviously our office is here, so if you need anything, and we're not too far from you over there in Winchester, so if you need anything or have further questions and might need some help diving deeper, give us a call. But essentially what I would start with is identify where all retirement accounts are, 403Bs, IRAs, 401Ks, all that stuff. Maybe any accounts you had, any accounts she had, get that identified. Insurance policies, did you have any life insurance or anything like that on her? If so, locate it, where is it at? And again, claims and all that stuff could be very time consuming. So if you need any help on that, let us know. Bank accounts. I always tell clients, spouses are really good at opening an account over here, over there, and it's hard to keep track sometimes. So kind of go through the mail or the documents you might have and see if there's any bank accounts out there you might not be aware of. That way we don't lose any money or misplace anything. Then looking at loans, right? Is there any car loans or boats or trucks or anything like that out there you don't know about? And then I'd say one of the most important things too is identifying if you have a trust or not. You probably remember if you do or you don't. You might not know where it's at, right? So go dig through the safe or the file cabinet and see if you could identify those. And then I would say, after you kind of identify everything, definitely give us a call or a financial advisor you trust and make sure you're going through it, because there's going to be a lot of different decisions and things like that might need to be made. And making sure you have someone to help walk you through all those is very, very important, because there might be tax implications or things like that on certain things. So making sure you're going through that properly, and then again helping establish a plan, because it sounded like she handled a lot of that. So getting something together for you as far as what's going to help make sure you're able to sustain your current lifestyle and the retirement you kind of hope for. And I always say, pass off all the stuff you don't have to do, right? You want to deal with the loss of your spouse and not all the paperwork. So find someone to help guide you through that. And obviously, like I said, we're here if you need anything.
Roy, again, I'd like to add my best thoughts and condolences to your situation, and I hope you will follow up with a phone call and talk face-to-face with Logan Sadler about all this, and he can give you much better advice if he knows more about the individual situation. 888-823-PLAN is the number to call. Leslie says she just inherited some money from her aunt, and she says it would be enough to pay off her house, but her interest rate is barely over 3%. So should she even worry about paying it off?
Yeah, that's a really great question, right? I think one of the big things I would say is, inheritances and lump sums of cash are it's when you get them, obviously it's a great blessing. Obviously in your situation though, it sounds like you lost a family member, so there's obviously that there. But I mean, as far as the cash, a lot of people feel a big responsibility. I was just talking to a client's daughter the other day, where she had gotten some money from something and had a pretty good lump sum, and she said, I'm just so nervous to do the wrong thing with it, right? You feel like a little responsibility or a burden there to do the right thing, and you don't always know what the right thing is. And I think paying off the house always sounds like the best thing, and in some cases it might be, but in many cases, taking that money, investing it, or paying down other things might be a little bit better than just paying off your house, especially with just a 3% mortgage. currently you could probably put it in a CD or a treasury or anything like that. It's going to pay you 3, 4, maybe even 5%. So it gives you some good interest on that money, and you get to keep the money to where if something else happens down the road, you still have some access to it. So I would say, getting with a financial advisor and kind of building out a plan. I don't know exactly how much the money is. It might be $100,000, it might be $500,000, but getting a plan built into where you can kind of see realistically, if we did this or that, what would be the benefit? How would it help me? And what are the long-term and short-term effects of those decisions, and then going from there. But before paying it off or doing any of that, give us a call. And like I said, we can kind of go through some of the intricate parts of what might be some of the better decisions or what mathematically works out to help accomplish your goals.
All right. If you want to call Logan Sadler's office, here's the number, 888-823-PLAN. We really appreciate your listening to the show today. Why not, right now, without any hesitation, pick up your phone, call 888-823-PLAN, leave a message with your name and phone number. You'll get a call back first part of the week from the good folks at Regary Financial, and you can arrange a time to have your conversation with Logan Sadler. It will be via Zoom. And if you prefer, it can be in the office, either in Hemet or Redlands. Your opportunity. Don't pass it up. It's free. There's no obligation involved. 888-823-PLAN is your number to call to make it happen. Next question here is from Cliff in Fontana. Cliff says, long-term care insurance is so expensive. No kidding. I've always been in good health, so I'm inclined to roll the dice and do without it. Is that stupid for me to do?
Well, I wouldn't say it's stupid, right? But I think great question first off. But I would say long-term care insurance is expensive, right? It's one of those things, depending on health and age, it could probably only get more expensive, right? But one of the things I would say is, good health and all that stuff is great. One of the things I would look at, though, is do you have other assets? Do we have other ways that we could help structure some type of a long-term care plan, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy coverage. I always say buying coverage is typically the easiest to get the most bang for your buck, right? We call it leverage in the financial world, where if you put in, a couple $100 a month, depending on age, it can give you a couple $100,000 of potentially of coverage payouts, right? So it's one of those things where you got to look at leverage, but also I have plenty of clients where we have enough money or different assets where we could structure them to where if something did happen, we at least have a bucket of money that we could touch first to help kind of combat some of that long-term care. But I wouldn't just go through it blindly. I would really kind of meet with us, and we could talk through it and really see what type of solutions we might have that could be a good fit for you.
Okay, one more question today, and it's from Diane in Highland. Diane says, I'm 62. My husband is 66. I have a small 401k at work, but we have about $700,000 in CDs at the bank. That money has been in CDs for about 6 years now. We're very conservative investors, which is why we're in CDs, but I'm wondering if that's the best choice for us.
Yeah, great. These are 3 great questions again. Again, we always have pretty good ones, but these are really good. What I would say is, good for you guys. You're at a good spot. Obviously, you have some money saved, which is great, and you're investing it, so it is making money. CDs can be a great thing for a very short time frame. I tell clients, if you're wanting to put $100,000 into an investment and get $100,000 minimum out a year from now or 2 years from now, CDs can be great investments, right? You know exactly what you're going to get out of them. The problem is the growth rate is not typically great over a period of time. Obviously, given current rates, they're pretty attractive. But looking historically, they're not going to give you a whole lot of return. The other thing is the tax impact on CDs. A lot of people, especially with cash, aren't aware. If you're making 3, 4, 5% on a CD each year, you're paying taxes on that each year, right? So a lot of times when you calculate the after-tax yield on that, depending on income, it might be a lot lower than a lot of people might think. So you might be better off doing maybe a treasury ladder, because treasuries can somewhat be more tax efficient, or a muni bond ladder, or something that still is conservative but might give you a little bit more tax efficiency, as well as there's things in the market and stuff like that obviously would have some tax efficiencies as well, just depending on risk. But I would definitely say in your guys' situation, we want to look at if we want to start deferring some of that tax, or if we want to start looking at ways where we might be able to make that a little bit more tax efficient than just having to pay tax on the interest each year.
Logan, great questions today, as you mentioned, and there are some folks out there who might be wondering how they get these questions to you. How do they do that?
Yeah, you could email us on the Financial Beat website, as well as you could also give us a call, right? You can call in, leave a message, and tell us what you'd like. You could also go over to the YouTube channels and comment and like on there, as well as, give us any questions you might want us to answer on there. So there's 3 or 4 different ways to get your questions over, and we always enjoy the questions and comments because that's what this radio show is about. That's what the podcast is about, as well as that's what the YouTube channel is about, right? Is to help give you guys some information, some value in some areas that you might want to learn more on, and then as well show you some areas that we might be able to help you in. So definitely head over to either of those 3 areas and leave us a comment there or a voicemail with a question, and we'd be happy to get that answered here on the show or even on the YouTube channel.
Well, there are lots of good ways you can get those questions to Logan Sadler and get some answers here on the radio show, perhaps. But if you'd like to have a conversation one-on-one with Logan, you can do that via Zoom, or you can come in and meet together in one of the offices, Hemet or Redlands. Number to call to make that happen is 888-823-PLAN, 888-823-PLAN. That's the number for Regary Financial. Been around a long time. Logan Sadler is the Vice President and Chief Investment Officer. Again, one more time, that number is 888-823-PLAN. We really appreciate your listening to the show today. And Logan, as always, it's been fun.
Yeah, as always, I appreciate your time, Ron, stopping by here with us. I appreciate each of the listeners out there for the support on the podcast, radio show, and YouTube channels. And guess what? We're going to be back here again next week with another one, and I'm already looking forward to it.
Yep, we'll see you next time on the Financial Beat with the one and only Logan Sadler.
Regary Financial and Insurance Services, Inc. and BD Financial Group, Inc. are separate and independent entities. The information provided in this presentation is presented for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, tax, or legal advice, nor does it constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities.